Hi, good evening. My name is Jay Rothman. I am the host of the show. Welcome to Real Men, Real Talk Live. Welcome back, viewers, to episode 191 on Real Men, Real Talk Live. We've been in the studio here. We've been dancing to the tune of Real Men, Real Talk Live. Viewers, if you hear something that you like or love tonight, we invite you to drop it down into the comment section. If you have any questions for us, we'll do our best to answer as many of them as possible. And welcome back to tonight's episode. Well, before we get into the episode, I want to introduce my co-host. We have Kamalu coming in from somewhere in Arizona. Uh, Welcome back, Kamalu.
It's a great honor as always to be here, my friend.
And of course, we have Chris Morrison coming in from another part of Arizona, coming in down from the Phoenix, Scottsdale Valley area. Welcome back, Chris Morrison. You're coming in hot tonight.
Yeah, coming in hot, coming in excited. So
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I want to just welcome a couple of viewers that I'm acknowledging right here. Charles Maddox, one of the founding brothers, one of the original members, one of the original male co-hosts of Real Men Real Talk Live. He says, "Hello, fellas." Well, Charles Maddox, welcome back. We're going to have a reunion show coming up real soon. We're going to have all of the original co-hosts of Real Men Real Talk Live coming in. We're going to do that sooner than later. I want to also welcome. Believe it or not, my mom's coming in from South Florida. Welcome back, Mom, to Real Men Real Talk Live. It's good to have you on the live tonight. Tonight's topic is one of those ones that we all try to wrap our heads around from time to time. It's on boundaries, boundaries and unconditional love. And it's one of those topics that at times we can get twisted. It can be intimidating. It can impact how we feel in a relationship, and it can impact how the relationship evolves from the boundaries. Kamalo, being that you're on the top shelf, I'm going to invite you to kick us off, get us hot, light us up, and get the show going tonight on boundaries. And what did you learn about boundaries most recently in your own life journey?
Shots fired.
All right, man. Well, my dad was actually just here visiting Sedona, and in talking with Jay about it and Chris about it, it was one of the main reasons why we decided to do this topic tonight. It's a very prevalent theme that I'm exploring right now. So, what I found myself doing while my dad was here, which, Dad, if you're listening, I love you, I honor you, and I apologize that I didn't have this conversation with you. It was hard to I find my father to sometimes be a lot of energy, and he speaks a lot. And I felt like the majority of the time that he was here, I spent listening beyond what I had capacity and space for. And I kept telling myself, like, he's only here for a couple of days. You know, there will be a day when he's not here at all. We don't live in the same place anymore. And so just kind of overriding what I felt, which was that I was tired sometimes. And I didn't express that to him. I didn't know in those moments how to set a healthy boundary. And one of the things in reflecting on my time with him, especially getting reflections from Jay when we were on a hike the other day, was one of my biggest takeaways was that as the adult now in my life, I have to be the parent for my inner child. which I know is something I've heard about and I've talked about before, but it made sense to me in a different way. What clicked for me was when I visualized my inner child as my physical child, which I don't have any physical children yet. But I can imagine this of being his dad, looking at this little child, having this experience, and then how I, as his parent, would need to step up and set a boundary. And yeah, that's been one of the biggest takeaways from that whole experience. It really highlighted to me the ways in which I wasn't setting boundaries in other relationships to a much lesser extent. I think my dad coming really highlighted the extreme to which I can still not honor myself and people please, as opposed to loving myself first and setting those boundaries and allowing them to have whatever experience of that they're going to have.
What do you hear, Chris? What are you hearing right now?
Just, I'm just glad that we have each other. That's really what it comes down to. Is what was coming through. Is like so many times we take these thoughts and we just sit on them, and we don't, you know, don't open up about what's really going on. And I just love it that, you know, Jay, you know me well enough, and we're all close enough where it's like you called me out, last night or 2 nights ago. It's like, hey man, how are you? Right? And it was a very poignant, like, how are you? And I was like, I'm fine. And we, and it's like I'm not being really, showing up in that moment as my authentic self. And as time goes on, we start to get into actually some of the stuff that's really going on. But no, it's such a beautiful creation for us all to show up for each other. Is really what I'm just kind of reveling in over here, basking in the brotherhood that is you two, and how we can constantly strive to be there for each other, but also kind of hold each other accountable for where we're at, and just continually grow together.
That's what it's about. Life should always be about growth. If we're not growing, we're dying. At least that's
I believe that.
that's how I've embraced my own healing journey in life. I want to take a moment here to come back to what Kamala was sharing about, and I want to acknowledge you and thank you for having the courage to be brutally honest right here, right now, to be in a show, to be live, knowing that your dad watches. There's a good chance your mom watches the show as well, wherever she's coming in from, and then for you to share something that you experienced just in a visit here last week or so ago with your dad, and being willing to express your truth, knowing that there could be, depending on how your dad receives it, there can be an opportunity for healing to take place. There could be an opportunity for your dad to be, you and your dad to have a conversation on the back end of tonight's show. And part of being in healthy relationships of all kinds is really having the courage to set healthy boundaries when when you feel they are necessary, when they are key to honoring and being respected in a relationship. And Kamalu and I alluded to, we talked about, it came up, his question for me was, well, how does boundaries and unconditional love sit in the same container? Like, how is it possible to have a relationship that's the foundation is unconditional love, yet we set boundaries? Boundaries feels like a condition is, and I'm paraphrasing how you shared it with me the other day in the wilderness. But as I shared with you, boundaries are really their framework for creating the healthiest relationship possible to be engaged in. It's not meant to be a punishment. It's not meant for any other purpose than for your needs to be respected and honored in that relationship. And it's that simple. The reason it becomes difficult is majority of people go to fear. If I set a boundary, I may be rejected. The relationship may end. Um, and that fear of being alone, that fear of not being in that relationship of an intimate relationship, whether it be with a partner, a husband, a wife, or even a friend or a family member, a siblings, even employment, our parents, as Kaimalu mentioned, it's critical that our voice is heard, that we're not shut down here at what I call the throat chakra. And we're so concerned about what someone else is going to think that we don't express what we need. I know my mom's watching the show, but I'll share this tonight. Um, I remember, I remember the moment when I felt like I set my first boundary with my own mom as an adult. I was 55 years old, and it happened on in a conversation on a call. And I'll tell you what, when I hung up the phone, I just raised my arms in the air and I just screamed out loud, I did it, I did it, I did it. And what I did was I had the courage to ask for what I needed in that moment. It was simple, not easy, because it took me 55 years to set a healthy boundary in that moment.
Mm.
And the truth is yeah, my mom pushed back. The next time we spoke, she kind of tested me a little bit there, but I held firm with love for myself, first and foremost, and in love for my mom. And at the same time, not with the intention of dishonoring or disrespecting my mom, but creating this mutual interaction where um, where I can ask for what I need, and it's then her choice to either honor that or not. But since that time, that went back to 2016 or so, I believe was that time frame. My relationship is different today. It's different because I had the courage to show up for myself. I had the courage to show up and grow up in that moment. And so, yeah, that was my there's my mommy story, Kamalu. And as I heard you say with for your dad, I said the same thing to my mom. I love you, mom, and I do. I love you. But at the same time, at any point when you need to set a boundary with me, when you have something that's not working for you, you have that same ability to do that. But this is where it gets confusing and at times intimidating. What do you make of that, Chris Morrison? Do you find boundaries to be intimidating in the past and or even in the present?
Yeah, yes and no, right? There's certain times where it's been like, since I got into like recovery, where there were certain things that were very easy to set boundaries around. Well, living to those boundaries, holding those boundaries actually was very hard, right? Like there was very easy things when it comes to, especially in my recovery space. There's very easy things in the intentions around the relationship that I'm building, right? Now we'll see how those boundaries go when they're tested. And when they have been tested in the past, I definitely have fallen back away from those boundaries because, I was trying to do the right thing in one way, shape, or form. And even though it was against the, you know, very straightforward, there was no gray around, some of the boundaries, drug use, stuff like that. There was no gray in that. But yet, time and time again, I stepped back away from that boundary. I let that boundary kind of get trampled on to the point where it was believed that that's just the way it was always going to be. And now that I'm fully stepping into that boundary, it's such a shock. It's such a different distinction. It's like I'm seen as a totally different person. I'm seen as this monster that's ruined everything, when it's really just there was an initial conversation we had, and now I finally have the strength. I finally have the courage. I was finally forced into a situation where I had to accept that boundary. So setting them, yes, simple enough. Holding them, like you said, for me, right? It's I just totally blanked on the term you used, Jay. Simple, not easy.
Well, that's where some of the confusion came in for me around boundaries with unconditional love, because I think all of us want to feel that we're loved and that we're held and that we're safe no matter what. So then I guess maybe this is a conflicting idea in my mind around boundaries, that when someone crosses a boundary, that means that that relationship ends. I guess it depends what it is, the boundaries crossed, but like you talked about the gray area there. Like, what is that dance of, I still want to have a relationship with you, but you crossed my boundary?
What do you think the answer is? Are you asking us to? Are you just asking a question for the universe, or what do you think the answer to that is, Kamala?
maybe seeing if there's a willingness to have a conversation around it, and if there's any kind of commitment to working on it. Again, though, I think it depends what boundary it is that's being crossed. Like Chris, you mentioned substances and that being like a hard one for you. In that, like, do you still have any kind of relationship with that person now who crossed that boundary?
I mean, no, not in a romantic type of way at all. There's no. And so for me, what finally happened is that I got to a point where having it around me made me want to use. And it got to a point where I was in danger. And that's where it really kind of pulled me out, right? Like, I can't be here. There is no gray area when it comes to my safety, right? If I am not safe, then there is no gray area in that. And I allowed that gray area because for a long time I was secure enough for where I was at, that it didn't pull me into that desire. But still, looking back now, I don't know, man. I agree with you. It's hard. It's so freaking hard in that, like, and I did what I thought was the right thing in the time, in that space. I really thought I was doing the right thing. But looking back now, man, it's How to be unconditional love when boundaries are crossed. Even though I'm no longer in a relationship with that person, we can always love somebody for where they're at, who they are. And even though I don't show up all the time in that, I try to speak this into existence. And there's always just gotta take care of ourselves sometimes, protect ourselves, be there for ourselves. Because I don't know, man. It's been a interesting journey on that. I had some more that I was going for, and it just totally left the ether. I'm sure it'll come back around, but
It'll come back. Where I'd like to go with this, I want to switch gears for a moment and ask this question: how do you start to set boundaries in an existing relationship where you have not set them before?
Hmm.
How would that play out? What would that look like? If you're in a relationship and you either didn't have the courage or you didn't know how to set boundaries, healthy boundaries, and all of a sudden, as you step into this new way of living, this new way of honoring yourself and your needs, how do you create boundaries with someone in a relationship? It could be a sibling. I'm talking about a relationship that most likely has got some tenure underneath it. It could be a sibling, it could be a parent, it could even be a partner or a child. What does that look like? Is it possible to create a healthy boundary in an existing relationship where they didn't exist before? And is it possible for you and that individual to grow together in that way? What do you think, Kamal? Is it a yes, is it a no, or is it I'm not sure?
Well, I'm sure it's possible, but I'm not sure because I believe that was my question in the production meeting. Um, my experience with that, man, I think like the most poignant example in my life has been my relationship with my mother, where I don't know, I decided I needed things to change in that relationship and didn't feel like she could meet me there. So I kind of went to the extreme of just like I'm not gonna talk to you anymore. And she felt hurt. She felt like I was punishing her. Um, I recognized too there was a lot of anger, and I was afraid of having her in my life, and like what there's so much to this, but afraid of what she would do to me with information about my life, how she would use that against me in some kind of way. So there's a lot of fear around it too, and making that decision to just totally cut her out. But I've kind of reapproached this relationship a couple of times, and that's kind of what I come to is we'll meet, we'll have a conversation, we'll maybe hang out a couple of times. I'm falling into old patterns in terms of not totally speaking my truth because I know that if I do, then it's going to be some kind of argument, some kind of fight. It's going to ruffle feathers. There isn't space to really have the kind of conversations I'd like to have. And so then my alternative, if that I keep coming back to, is like, okay, well then I just can't talk to her, can't have a relationship with her. And at the same time, she's my mom. She's always going to be my mom. So that's confusing.
Are you open to hear from me? Okay. first I want to acknowledge you and thank you again for having the courage to share what you just shared. You know, we're live, we're on air, we're streaming. Most likely, mom's going to see you, hear this live or on replay. And I will share with you that it's not uncommon for children and parents to have to go through these moments in the relationship in our adulthood where we're not at peace, and so we back off, we back away. And I did that twice. I did that in my 20s, and I did that much later in my adulthood with my own mom. I backed off, and I chose not to be relational for 4 years, I believe, or so, both times. And what I learned from that, Kamalu, is that even though we were not communicating, I was still carrying the heavy burden, the energy, the sadness of um, not having that relationship. It didn't dissolve the emotions that put me in a timeout in the first place. I chose to put myself in that timeout. But what I didn't know was that it's a form of avoidance. If you're able to literally sit down with a parent and express what you need in a relationship, and if they're willing to listen, maybe negotiate or come to an agreement where it's a win-win for both of you. There may be some things that she needs from you and vice versa. Then if it can be a win-win where you're able to honor each other's needs, respect each other's needs without avoidance, without not being engaged, I found that that for me was the healthiest way to heal my own relationship with my mom. The relationship I have with my mom today, in my humble opinion, is the healthiest it's ever been in my life.
Mm.
And it's because I had the courage to just be my authentic self and express what I need. And even if I can't speak for my own mom, I can't speak for unless I was to have a jump on air right now, which is not going to happen tonight. But ultimately, this is an opportunity for us as men to grow up. Even in relationships outside of a parent relationship where we set a boundary with a friend or a girlfriend or whomever, um, I think the part of us that's fearful of it, of what will happen if the boundary is not held or honored, is that we're going to lose that relationship. And I want to invite at least you two as my co-hosts that the next time you go into that pattern of somewhat of fear,
Mm.
pause, close your eyes, and ask yourself, how old am I feeling emotionally right now? Because the likelihood that you're feeling much younger than what your chronological age is pretty substantial, pretty significant. It's usually the younger child that's fearful of losing a friend. And how, when you were a kid, did you ever ever have a fight with a friend and you were fearful you lost a friend? We've all gone through that. If we didn't, then I don't know where you could have been living. I did. I did. I knew I went through that, and not that we were setting healthy boundaries as children, but we find ourselves, I think, in that same place as an adult. If we set the boundary and they don't follow it or they don't honor it, I should say, what do we do with that relationship? And I do believe that a large part of the fear comes from our younger self within, our inner child that's
Mhm.
scared that if I set the boundary and they don't honor it, I'll be rejected. On a deeper level, there's perhaps some old abandonment wounding that we've been carrying as adults from our childhood. Is any of this making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think especially with parents too, it's also a survival thing. when you're a child, if the relationship with your parent ends, or that's the fear, the relationship with the parent ends, then that's it. Like I can't take care of myself at that point. And I think the same is kind of true for the classroom, because the classroom at that point in time is your whole world. If you're rejected from the classroom or by your family, you don't know how you're going to survive.
Mary Kelly asks a good question. She says, can you view her as another soul instead of as your mom?
Hmm. Hmm.
What do you think she means by that, Chris? What is she getting at?
We're all people having a people experience. We're all equal and the same. We're all one, and that to put a label on any person is to box them in, strip them maybe a little bit of who they are, but also box them into a specific um, archetype. And then also, something you go back to is putting them on a pedestal, right? Our parents go on those pedestals, right? We continually put them up above us, right? They're not one of us, one with us. They are here. And when we put anybody up there, it's going to cause disease. It's going to cause tension. As we are an adult, right? Right. It's probably pretty healthy as a kid in some stances, but not seeing ourselves as equals, seeing ourselves, then of course, well, we're seeing ourselves as less than, right? And when we get into that space of we are less than, it's just not a healthy place to create from.
So this really does tie into the whole concept around when we do hold our parents on that pedestal in our adulthood. It is part of the fear of, if we set a boundary, what happens to the hierarchy in the relationship? What happens to uh, our parents' role and our role? And again, I will share with you, I'm going to kind of repeat this, is that when I finally had the courage to set one boundary with my mom, and she probably has no recollection of what it was, I remember what it was because it was a very, very defining moment in my life as her son, as an adult man, that changed my relationship with her in a very positive way. However, for me to set that boundary with my mom, you nailed it, Chris. I had to take her off that pedestal, meaning she's no longer mommy. I don't need her to feed me. I don't need her to put me to sleep at night. I'm an adult. What it does mean is that I could honor, respect, and love my mom in a space right where she is at, not necessarily where I think I want her to be at. Take that one in, Kamala.
Say
Right?
it one more time, please.
I could love my mom right in a space where she's at.
Mm.
Healthy boundaries in place. I can accept her, love her, respect her, and honor her right where she's at, even though it may not be where I would like her to be. But that's just an opinion anyway. That's just my perception of what I'm interpreting. And who knows that any of that's true anyway? How many times do we create stories in relationships that aren't even freaking true? So today, my mom's off that pedestal. She's been replaced, not by another woman, but by myself. I had to learn how to take care of myself. I had to learn how to parent that child within me, how to protect him, how to love him, how to hold him, how to nurture him, how to comfort him, as what I would refer to as that mystical parent. And my mom, our relationship is very different today. One that I'm so grateful for. But heck, it took a long time. It took decades, 5 decades to get there. I do believe it's possible that we could, in an existing relationship, bring boundaries in where they haven't been before, because that's an example of what I did it with my own mom. I want to switch gears here. What role do you think does self love play in healthy boundaries? Do you think it has a factor, self love, and having the courage to set boundaries or create them? Or is it a lack of self love that prevents us from setting boundaries in the first place? Kamala, what are you thinking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, to not honor my own needs, of course, is not behaving or acting from a place of self-love, and nor is it giving the other person the opportunity to really love me either. I'm just realizing that right now.
Say that again.
Not honoring my needs by setting boundaries doesn't only negate my own self-love, but it prevents the other person the opportunity from actually being able to love me.
Hmm.
Because my needs are part of me. And if I'm not honoring me, then who are they even in a relationship with in the first place?
Basically, what I just heard you say is it's an illusion.
That's not real.
How many of us are in relationships that aren't real? Because if we're not speaking and asking for what we need, it's, we heard this term before, smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
A lot of smoke and a lot of mirror. What is the number one fear that we have if we were to set a healthy boundary? Set a boundary. What's the number one fear we have? What's your number one fear, Chris?
Not being heard.
Hmm?
Not being heard. That it just lands like, I know a lot of my things come from not feeling like I'm enough, like that I'm worthy. And so why bring it up anyways? Because it doesn't matter. Most of my creation comes from I don't matter. If I died right now, no one would notice. And so why bring it up? Because nobody fucking cares.
All right. Stop right there.
This is old me.
Well, okay. But there's still some of that still kind of trickles through at times.
For
And
sure.
I will say this to you is that, as you mentioned tonight, when we got together just a couple of nights ago for the Sunday for the production meeting, we hadn't started the meeting yet, and I just knew that you were not okay.
Yeah.
I felt it. 2 hours away by car. So if there's any part of you that's still living in that old story that old wound, it's not true anymore.
Yeah.
At least it's not true between you and I. Because I saw you, I felt you, and I just asked a simple question. I said, Chris, are you okay? You don't seem to be okay. And in that moment, you put on your tough guy face and, yeah, I'm okay.
I'm
Just been a
tired.
long day, or however you put it.
I'm
But
tired. It's been a long day. I didn't sleep well.
yeah, but I want to invite you in the future when someone recognizes that or recognizes or sees something, we don't have to minimize it anymore. We could
Yeah.
just, you know what? We could just say, you know what? Give me a moment here to collect myself. Maybe even close your eyes, take a breath, and then honor being seen. Honor that truth of which I saw and felt. Because you know what? You deserve that, man. You deserve, just like Kamalu does, just like I do, just like everyone does. We all deserve to be seen, understood, heard, respected, and honored.
Yeah. I love what Mary put in here a bit ago. How many times does someone ask us how we are and we say good, fine, okay, right? How about if we pause and feel that emotion, right? And that's what I didn't do with you guys, Sunday night. And I think that's what we do often, right? Like I had it on full screen, so I didn't see that until just now, but it's just like that. That's what really has been coming through for me, is that when we go into these conversations, can we be present? Can we be authentic?
Hmm.
And when we go into these, when we come into the places where we need to have these conversations, if we're coming through in the most authentic way, the way that we show up for each other, right? The way that us three, show up for each other, if we can take that and be present with that as often as possible, when people have a reaction to what's coming up for us, I have no problem with saying I love you, but from over here. Because if you don't have space for my authentic self and how I feel and how I am and who I am, like, that's a different journey for you. And that's okay. But not being authentic, not allowing the other person, just like you said, not allowing people to see us as our true selves, is robbing them the opportunity to truly love us for who we are.
And we're robbing ourselves of being open to receive the love. Because when we
All of
put
it.
up that false illusion of everything's okay,
Yeah.
however we say it or frame it out,
Yeah. I mean,
in that
you
moment,
offered
we're
me
not honoring who we are.
that there's this great analogy that I have. You offered me the most beautiful gift, Jay, to be seen. Chris, are you okay? Right? What you're saying to me is, Chris, I see you. I feel you. What's going on here, man? And, I took that and I just slapped that gift right out of your hand and walked away. And so, like, thank you for staying persistent in that space that you held open for me and allowing me to come back to that, because like that's a beautiful gift that I've been looking for my entire life. Because like what I said about like not feeling worthy, that I could die at any moment and nobody would even notice, like that's a truth for me that persisted for decades. And so to know that I am seen, to know that I am loved, to know that I am worthy, is the basis of this shift that that we're all seeing. So thank you for being a fundamental, foundational block of that new creation for me.
Welcome home. One more time. How does it feel to be home?
Mm.
There you go.
It's joy, and sometimes it's confusing and a little scary. Sometimes, it's like, this is so new, but it's beautiful. It's real.
What do you think makes it scary?
I'm probably going to have to think on that a little bit.
Okay. I could share with you what comes up for me.
Beautiful.
Fear. If I open my heart a little bit more, shit, I can get hurt again. I can get sent to my room again. I may not be seen for another decade or more. So the uncomfortableness is, the fear is that, will this last, or is this just a one and done? And for some it is one and done. But so much of that has to do with, who do we surround ourselves with? Who do we allow into our inner circle? And when we make healthy choices in who we allow into our inner circle of relationships, friendships, intimate relationships, we're going to still learn, and we're going to still have those moments where it could feel unsettling, scary. But part of this journey in life is learning how to finally ask for what you need in all of your relationships, all of them. And when you finally have that courage to ask for what you need from a loved one, from a friend, you're finally going to be set free. It will be a physical experience that affects you emotionally in a very big way, and vice versa. You will finally be set free, my friend. Part of why we do the show, and why in this season I wanted to bring in some younger blood, some younger guys like you and Kaimalu, is because, you see, heck, I didn't set that first boundary with my own mom until I was 55 years old. And we have an opportunity just by doing this show tonight on boundaries. Like, wow, what a gift for you, Kaimalu, and for you, Chris, when you step in and start to create some healthier framework in your relationships that matter to you most. And you ask for what you need. And then if that individual is not willing to compromise or hear you or see you, then you get to assess. You get to either assess that I'm willing to negotiate the boundary or I'm not willing to. And what that'll provide to you is affirmation. Affirmation around the foundation of that relationship. Affirmation that if that individual is not willing to see you and honor what you need in that moment, there's your affirmation that there's no duality. There's no volley. It's like taking that tennis racket or that pickleball racket and banging it against an old handball, cement handball wall. You're playing by yourself. Healthy relationships all need healthy boundaries in order to remain significant. What kind of healthy boundary look like in a relationship?
I'd love to hear what Kamala's got sitting in his head right now. I think that I've got something that I want to follow up with on that topic for sure.
What can a healthy boundary look like? Like an example?
Sure.
I love you. I hear you. I'm tired right now. My cup is low. I want to be able to hold space and be there for you. I just don't have the capacity for that right now. Maybe we can reconvene another time, but right now I just need to take a little bit of time for me.
So that's setting a framework around what you need in that moment from an individual. However, what's the consequence if that individual ignores that you need that quiet time for yourself? They're not willing to honor that request. What does that look like then? How do you then follow through on? Well, I call it a consequence, and many people don't like that word consequence. Um, I think you said earlier today, Kamali, an impact. What would be the impact or the effect if that person is not willing to give you some space and or include you in a reciprocity of a conversation, like ask you some questions? And it's okay to say, I'm not sure if you're not sure. That's okay too.
Yes, I don't know. I guess just removing myself from the situation at that point.
Take a break.
Walk
There's different levels of boundaries too. Some are really bigger than others. Some are smaller. Some are just an immediate need, and that's kind of like what you were talking about there. Like in that moment when you have a visitor and you need some space, because if you're with them 24/7 except for sleeping time, and it's a lot, whether it's 1 day, 3 days, or 3 weeks, it's a long time to spend with an individual that you don't live with today, whomever that is. It could be a friend, whoever it is. But it's really learning how to take care of yourself, right? And asking for what you need or telling what you need. In that moment, it's like, you know what? I'll see you in a couple hours. I need some me time. I need some time just to kind of chill by myself for myself. That's a boundary. To some extent, you're telling what you need. Now, there's really not an impact because you're not telling them, well, if you don't do this, then this is what's going to happen. You're just going to take action. That's taking action. So there's different levels of boundaries too.
Yeah, I think it's scary because I always felt like, and the reflection I've got a lot is how well I can show up and hold space for other people, and that's been something I've like prided myself in and felt like was what I had to offer in a lot of relationships. And so I think to actually start expressing and asking for the same space and the same permission being given to me, like totally, it's like something that reframes almost every relationship I have in my life at this point. It's not something I've allowed myself to practice or ask for. I've always been very ready and willing to give, but not to receive in the same way. And I think I always thought that that was my value as someone in a relationship, was not being too much while being able to hold space for them.
What are you hearing, Chris Morrison?
On the relationship side, um, I've talked a little bit about the intentions document that Jamie and I have started building, and I'm kind of playing with that in my head of like, how is this intentions document that we're created, that we are each other's teammate, we grow together, we honor our commitments, hold space for release, right? All of these things, like, those are the things that we are leaning into as the creation of our relationship. And part of the conversation is, I think follow on conversation for that is, when one of us doesn't feel like this is being upheld, what do we do? And I think that in this conversation that's kind of come up for me is like, we can say it, hey, I don't feel like this is happening. But is there more in-depth conversation to have around when one of us isn't feeling like the person's holding up their side of the bargain on this? What does that look like? And so that's that consequence aspect of it, right?
Well, I think it's important to go there, because if you don't, how you're going to receive it on a subconscious level is, I don't matter. Because if your need is not being met in a specific boundary that you've set, that you've expressed something that you need from the relationship, whether it be emotionally, mentally, physically, sexually, or spiritually, if it is a relationship of a partnership, an intimate one, you're going to fall right back into the core wounding of, I'm not seen, I don't matter, I'm not enough. So that's where holding your agreement in the boundary is about showing up as the adult for that child within you. That little he's right there just waiting to see, are you going to show up for him? Are you going to protect him? Are you going to stand up for him? Or are you going to abandon him the way he felt abandoned when he was younger? It can be an absolutely healthy, beautiful way to experience a new level of intimacy in all of our relationships. But it takes some level of courage, no doubt. It takes some level of um, maturity.
Hmm.
Because as we age, as we go through the aging process, let's say in a relationship with someone else, whether it be a friendship or an intimate relationship, um, what happens is we start to take inventory on a subconscious level. And as we take an inventory, we start to keep score of that inventory. And then on the back end of keeping score is resentments will come through. And the resentments come through in the rolling of the eyes, the hands on the waist, the turning our back and storming out of the room, the slamming of the door. All those behaviors that we witness our children or we as children behave. We show up doing the exact same thing as an adult. Because it always will come back to the resentments of our core wounding, not being seen, heard, understood, don't matter, not valued, not loved. I think it's a beautiful way to really uplevel our own relationship with ourselves. Boundaries truly are not for the other person, they are for us. And when we have the courage to dabble, begin to test the waters, start small. You don't have to blow it up with everybody. Just start small. Practice. It's kind of like, that first time you pick up a baseball bat when you were a kid, and that ball comes at you from the pitcher's mound, and you miss it. You get a strike, and then all of a sudden, the next pitch comes and you make contact, and you get a hit. Do you remember how that felt?
I never played baseball.
Okay, that's fair.
Played cricket.
Okay. Well, apply it to whatever sport you played as a child, Kamala. That first time, that first moment where it felt good.
Yeah.
It's that same experience when you set that loving boundary for yourself, and then the end result is it's honored, it's respected. It's going to feel like the first time you won that game, Kamala. As we are just over the hour, I want to give each one of you an opportunity. Believe it or not, it's time to put a pretty bow on the show and call it a wrap. So I want to invite, since you opened this up, Kamala, Chris, I'm going to put you in a hot seat right now to maybe put some closing thoughts on tonight's topic around boundaries and unconditional love. What would you say was your summary, or close us out?
Comes through really, man, is just that being present and authentic, right? Part of my declarations are that I am authentic in every place that I am, that there will be no filter. And like having this conversation shows me another place where I can be more authentic, be more present, and really lean into my document. And so I love that I get to continue to grow and learn and be a better version of myself and give people the most real version of myself to love in return. So
Beautiful. How does that feel to hear yourself speak those words?
actually, it's like I'm being very determined in the creation, like focused on this creation. That this is important. This is intentional. I'm not just doing this willy nilly. That there's, that this allows me to be more and more and more free.
You got it. Yeah. Beautiful. Kamala, you're up, man. What do you got? Closing thoughts, words from boundaries and unconditional love. What do you? What's your top takeaway from tonight? What are you bringing home with you tonight?
I think top takeaway for me is the actual loving aspect of it, allowing people to actually be in an authentic relationship with me and to actually love me by being true to myself and my needs and my boundaries. And then another thing that came through and just receiving and listening to you guys speak is that um, the most unconditionally loving thing that we can do for people is to allow them to have their own journey. And if part of that journey for them is learning the consequences or the results of their actions, then me stepping up and setting a healthy boundary, even if that means stepping away from a relationship, is not only the most unconditionally loving thing I can do for myself, but also for them, even though it might hurt us both.
Beautiful. Yeah, something that came through as I was listening to you wrap it up, Kamala, is that when we're willing to explore boundaries, something that we've avoided in our past relationships, as we've learned tonight, not only do can we feel empowered in a very healthy, loving way, but we also can provide that gift of empowerment to the other individual by learning how to honor and respect perhaps a boundary that they have set with us.
Permission to do the same.
Yes. Yeah. And then even be able to talk about it and acknowledge it. This is how we grow up. No longer being afraid of the unknown, the spoken, the unspoken, but ask for what you need. Open your throat chakra. Allow your voice to be heard. And then honor it, acknowledge it when your friend, family member, a partner holds on their boundary and we honor that for them. And if it's something that's new, it's even okay to acknowledge that and thank them. Thank you. Thank you for setting this boundary with me. Although initially it kind of felt icky or it kind of was resistance there. But learning how to honor someone else's boundary without having a temper tantrum or running or gunning, that's how we grow up in relationships. And so, viewers, if you heard something this evening that you liked or loved, we invite you to share tonight's program out with friends and family. Perhaps maybe you can even watch a replay with them. If you and they are, if you have awareness that your relationship lacks boundaries and it's something that's important for you and that relationship, maybe you can use that as a foundation for learning how to create what you need in that relationship with that individual. Work on it together. And with that, gentlemen, as always, it has been such an honor, such a gift to be here with you tonight to talk about. This is one of those most difficult topics, boundaries. It is, it's no matter, unless you've mastered the skill set the majority of people have no idea what a healthy boundary can look like. We only know what punishment can feel like, and boundaries are not meant to feel like punishment. Boundaries are meant to be able to express what we need, and then for those needs to be met. And so, with that, viewers, we love you. Thank you for joining us this evening. And hopefully, you'll come back next week as we jump into episode 192. But for now, we love you. Have an amazing evening. Keep showing up for that boy, for that girl within you. And thank you for joining us this evening on Real Men, Real Talk, Live!